learn more about endowments, and hopefully after all the presentations have been given, you as a local church body will have an endowment for your own church. If at any time, if you have a question that you want me to answer, just raise your hand and I will do it to the best of my ability. And if you're like me, sometimes once the presentation is over, I get 10 minutes down the road and then I'll have another question. So at that point, all you have to do is direct your questions to Pastor Adrian. She'll get it to me and I'll get an answer back for you. So how does that sound? Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to give thanks to God for who you all are and what you have done in this community and how you have impacted so many lives. I'm looking at a lot of you that I have met or have known. So it's good to be with you all in this capacity. Many of you all know I was a district superintendent prior to this current role that I am in now. But the big thanks go not only to God, but to Pastor Adrian and the team, the leadership team that she assembled. They have spent countless hours and meetings talking about this endowment. So this is not an undertaking that they have taken lightly. They have prayed about it, they have talked about it, they have prayed about it, they have talked about it, and they have discussed it. And she has gathered a group of experts with financial backing and trustee banking. So trust me, those who are on this ad hoc team was not put together lightly. So you all as a church body, I'm gonna back up a little bit. You all are in good hands. Well, first, let me ask this question. How many of you all have heard of the Georgia United Methodist Foundation? Just raise your hands for me. Okay, we got a few in here that have heard of the Georgia United Methodist Foundation. Well, currently I serve as the Regional Vice President and Director of Lending. And what that means is my job is to go around South Georgia talking about and discussing the financial products and services that the Georgia United Methodist Foundation offers. And when I've only been in the job not quite 2 years. Actually, September was my first year being in this new appointment. So I'm still learning a lot, but grateful for the opportunity to serve. When I accepted this appointment, I quickly learned that the Georgia United Methodist Foundation is one of the best kept secrets in South Georgia. We've been around for a long time. We've been around since 2010. How many of you knew we've been around for that long? We've been around since 1987, but we combined with North Georgia in 2010. So we've been around for a long time. It is a ministry of the United Methodist Church, of the South Georgia Conference and of the North Georgia Annual Conference. What we do is we provide faith-based solutions for local churches and church-related entities, as well as individuals and families. But tonight, what I'm going to talk about is legacy giving, and specifically in the lane of legacy giving, endowments. How many of you all are familiar with an endowment, or you give to one, or you've heard of endowments before? Many people have. If you mention Duke Endowment, huge. Lilly Endowment, huge. When I was in seminary, we would always thank God for Uncle Eli and Aunt Lily, because they poured into us into seminary because of endowments. What is legacy giving? Legacy giving is about long-term giving and long-term growth. But when it comes to the local church, when we think about stewardship, some of the first things we think about is what? Tithe and offering. And given to an annual stewardship campaign. Those are primarily the two lanes of stewardship, or the two lanes of giving that many local church refers to. But there's a whole nother lane of giving that local churches can take advantage of. And so that's why I'm here tonight to talk about it. While we can't make it without tithe and offering, we know God talks about tithe and offering, and we are so grateful for that. We're grateful for the stewardship campaign and how we make those pledges and give to those as well. But both are necessary. But how many of you all have thought about resourcing your church's mission and ministry beyond the right now? Beyond or even the next 5 years, because some of us will look at where we are now, where we are the next 5 years or the next 10 years. But endowment pushes us to think even beyond that. It encourages us to push to think about giving in a perpetual manner, forever and forever. So, what is an endowment? An endowment is a permanent source of income that can be invested to resource the missions and the ministries of the church that go way beyond our lifetime. And all of this is given to help secure the financial future of the church. Before I go any further, are there any questions about what an endowment is? Okay. All right. Now, when we think of endowments, I mentioned the big ones, the Lilly Foundation and Duke Endowment. So when a lot of people think of endowments, they think you got to have 6 figures to start an endowment. And that's just simply not true. You don't have to be the richest church on the block. You don't have to be the richest individual to pour into an endowment or to make an endowment work for you or to grow an endowment. With the Georgia United Methodist Foundation, you only need $5,000 to start an endowment. Let me repeat that. $5,000, not individually, but $5,000 collectively as a faith community or as a church to start an endowment. Again, prior to this role, I was a district superintendent, and you would not believe some of the sizes of the churches that had endowments. Because again, many of us think large membership churches are the only one that have endowments. Well, that's not true. I've had some churches with less than 10 people on roll that have endowments. And you would think to your mind, how in the world does a church with 10 members still stay operational? How in the world does that church continue to make an impact on the community with the small amount of members that they have? Anybody want to take a guess how? What are we talking about? Bingo, I wish I had a payday. I'd give it to everybody who just said endowment. That is correct. So what happened, somebody long time ago, because the people who started that endowment have gone on to glory 50, 60 years ago. But they had enough forethought to think not only where the church was right then and there, not only where the church would be in 5 years or 10 years, but they loved their church community so much, but they thought about where the church would be and where they would like for the church to be long after they have gone on to glory. See, they were taught about legacy giving a long time ago, and because of that endowment, because somebody poured into that church or a group of people, and they can still continue to pour into them, a church with 10 people or less is still in operation, still feeding the people in their community, still giving clothes to people in their community because of an endowment. Because if we think about it, 10 people in this economy, God can do amazing things, but God can do a whole lot greater when we give God a whole lot more to work with. And so because somebody poured into that church, started an endowment many, many years ago, that church is still operational. That church is still making an impact on the community, and that church is still spreading the love of Jesus Christ. Now, I mentioned large membership churches. When we pass them, we see these great edifices. And I'm looking around at St. Mary's Rose, have been here many, many times. You all have done wonderful. in taking care of your church. You all continue to do a great job. And we look at those churches that have campuses. Again, how do you think all of that comes about? Do you think it's only from tithing and offering? Tithing and offering, excuse me. Where you think all of it comes from? They have multiple sources, multiple areas, and multiple lanes of resources. And that is what I would love for our churches to begin to think about. Not just tithe and offering, we need it and we thank God for it. Not just the annual budget, we're grateful for it. But what other faith-based financial products that we can take advantage of that's been around for a very, 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 very long time that others have been taking advantage of. So I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And the awesome thing about an endowment is that as the local church body, you all get to create it however you want to. You know, as the Georgia United Methodist Foundation, we hold the fiduciary responsibility, which means we hold the financial responsibility. Whatever you give to us, we will invest it for you. But how that endowment is structured is up to you all. And again, your committee has done a wonderful job. So some people want to create an endowment for a specific ministry. Some may want to do it for music. Some may want to do it for youth. Some may want to do it for the Now Ministries, which is nurture, outreach, and worship. And others may want to do it for like building or for any kind of ministry that they can think of is what they would want to do it for. So the bottom line again is, it is in you all's hands how you all create your endowment. It is up to you all with the specifics of the endowments. Well, you may be saying, well, how does the money work for an endowment? Again, I said the initial investment for the faith community for the local church is $5,000. The principal is what is continuously reinvested in the endowment. Now, another good thing about the endowment, the more you pour into it, the more you give to the endowment, guess what? The greater it'll be. And a true endowment provides permanent income, so you do not touch the principal. What is distributed back to the church from missions and ministries is the earned income from that endowment. So the more you reinvest, the more you give, guess what? The greater your endowment will be. So it is designed to have long-term perpetual income, okay? Do we have any questions about that? Oh man, y'all a good crowd tonight. That is awesome, awesome. So, and there are many ways that you can give to an endowment. We can give through our insurance plan. How many people, when you think about a will, do you think about a church? Don't say nothing, just look straight at me. Don't look at Pastor Adrian. Don't do it, okay? Do not do it, just look straight ahead, okay? But how many of you think about giving 2% to your church that you love, that your faith has been nurtured and has done so much for you? How many of you think about that? Don't even blink. Don't even blink. So that's the way that you can give to your endowment, because some may be thinking, well, I don't know if I have it to give right now. But there are other ways to give. So think about through your insurance policy. What about your 401k plan? You can give a percentage or a dollar amount to that as well. And think about an endowment like you think about your retirement plan. How many of you all think that if you only put money in your checking account and your savings account, that you will be able to live the rest of your golden years just beautifully without any other instrument, without any other financial product or services. How many of you all think you can just live on what you put in your checking account and what you put in your savings account? If anybody raised their hand, I got some beachfront property on Williams Road to sell you. Okay? So we know that when we think about investing, most, if not all of us, have been exposed to it. And we recognize the benefits of not just adding, but multiplication, which investing causes. So if we're willing to do that for us individually with our retirement or with a college fund or whatever, why are we not doing that for our church? So if we can prepare for our individual future, let's be the Christians that God called us to be, those good stewards that God has called us to be, to prepare for our future. And I like an endowment because the endowment is the gift that keeps on giving. So even when we have gone on to glory, we are still making an impact because what we invested in our own local church. We're still in the business of making disciples, even though we're not here, but because we gave to a vehicle, to a product, to a service that will continue to give back to others. And that's what's important. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And if we continue again to pour into that endowment will continue to pour back into your local church ministries, and your local church missions as well. Do we have any questions about that? Okay, another way that you can give when it comes to endowments is also you can give in honor of or in memory of. What a wonderful way to celebrate your family member or your friends or any loved one's memory by giving to an endowment. So not only do you benefit, but their memory helps along as well with the church now and the church in the future as well. And let me ask you all this. I don't know about you, but it seems like at the end of every year, I get more and more people asking for stuff. Do y'all, it seem like every year I get more and more stuff where people are constant, and I don't mind, and I really don't mind giving, especially after I've investigated the organization or the nonprofit. But it makes me feel good when I can give to something that's going to go beyond the operating expenses of that organization. Many of you in here are college graduates, and I'm pretty sure all of your colleges, I was getting ready to say seminary, Adrian. You see how my mind is still on seminary. Your colleges or universities, they have endowments set up as well. Your fraternities and your sororities, they have endowments as well. You have I think St. Jude Research, you have this nonprofit, that nonprofit. They all have not foundations, but they all have endowments set up. So what you give can be multiplied. I was in a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago. She gave me a call, and she said, Reverend Smalls, I want to give to this particular church, and I want to know if they have an endowment. I said, I can't answer that question for you. You probably will have to ask the pastor, that information, or somebody on the finance team. And she said, the reason why I like to give to the endowment, because my sorority just asked me to give, and I've given to them. But she said, what if my church doesn't have one? I said, well, just call me and I'll come and talk to your church about starting one, okay? That will not be a problem at all. What are you saying? I'm saying if the church don't act, somebody else will. I'm saying that it's important that you have a product that when people come, they can give to it and they will understand that their money is going to be multiplied. Okay? So it's not only going to help the present ministries, but it's going to help those ministries and those missions in the future. So that's the important thing about an endowment, is that it's not only about your present day ministry, but it's about your future ministries as well. So when you create an endowment, you're saying you not only care about the right now of your local congregation, but you care about the future. You're not only saying that we care about making disciples now, but we care about making disciples long after we're gone. You're not only saying that you care about the generations now, but you care about the generations in the future. You are not only saying that St. Mary's Road is doing great missions and ministries now, but you want to set St. Mary's Road up so they can do even greater things in the future. And I believe that one generation should do better than the last generation. I really do. You are saying that you are willing to go the extra mile in providing new services and programs because it provides another stream of income. If you would, look at St. Mary's Road Endowment Church statement for me. And I want us to go all the way down to the bottom. And it says, an endowment fund says that our church. I would like for somebody to read these out, if you don't mind. Hmm? Amen. Someone else. Okay. Mm-hmm. Say that one more time. Amen. Very good. I wanted to hear you all's voices so you can hear yourselves in terms of what it is, what are the benefits of an endowment. It's an awesome vehicle. It's an awesome opportunity. Many churches, many nonprofits and other charities have already taken advantage of it. So I would hate for us as a local church or as a faith community not to take advantage of an endowment. And again, it's not like some where you may need maybe $100,000 or something to start with. Here, you need $5,000, and that's it. And let me give you another example of how an endowment benefited me from someone I never met. I really never met them. When I went to seminary in 2002, I was right here in Columbus and went to Gammon Seminary. And there were two ladies, two educators, two teachers, who set up an endowment before they died. They didn't have any kids, and they wanted to help those who would further their theological education. And so, again, they did it probably back in the 80s or so, and they passed on. But because they set up an endowment, I had funds to go to seminary. Never met those women before in my life. I don't even know if I would have ran across them because I grew up in South Carolina, not Columbus, Georgia. But because of their generosity, I was able to shave some of the expenses off of my theological education. And what started out I don't know exactly the amount that was given, but I know what it is now. I know that endowment is over $1 million because they continue to reinvest, because it continues to grow. And that's what an endowment does. You continue to reinvest, and it continues to grow. It is something that is doable, and it's a sign of generosity that you understand that every good and perfect gift comes from God. And then I'm reminded of that parable. I think it's Matthew 25. We talk about the parable of the talents. How one had 5 talents, went out, invest, got 5 more. Then there was one who had 2 talents, went out, invest, got 2 more. And what did the one with the 1 did? Buried them in. And God said, well, at least you could have took it to the bank and invested in it. So even in the Bible, we have a lot of biblical examples of stewardship. But what I'm saying is invest in yourselves and invest in your future and see what God does through you and what God does for you. Are there any questions that you have for me? Your leadership team, they have come up with a resolution for you guys to vote on. Like I said, they have spent hours and hours and hours making sure that you all are positioned as a local church to benefit from an endowment. Do you all have any questions for me? I don't want to take up somebody else's time. Any questions for me? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I can't hear. Okay, no problem. Did you all hear her question? She says she literally knows nothing about endowments. And when I mentioned the $5,000, she said, where would that money go and how will it be invested? That's a very good question. Thank you for asking. The funds will be invested with the foundation, just like you have in your own personal investments. They will be invested that way. And your committee gets to pick what type of investments that they want to invest in as well. So the church also has a choice in that. Along with that, because we are United Methodists, we also have something called social principles. So thank you for asking that question. Social principles count out morals or ethics that guide us. So when you invest with the Georgia United Methodist Foundation, you do not have to worry about investing in companies that go against our morals or go against our ethics. For example, we will not be investing your funds in Jack Daniels or tobacco or pornography or anything of that nature, but all of our investing aligns with our social principles, which is our ethical and moral guidelines for contemporary issues. Thank you, very good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Would the committee let the congregation know as a whole what they're investing in, or they just pick the stuff that they invest in?
Well, it's pretty much 2 funds. And they can pick the individual funds. I would probably recommend to pick either one of those 2 funds, and I'll share that information with the committee, and then the committee can decide to share that with the church. Yes, ma'am. So I'll leave that up to the experts on the committee. Yeah. Any other questions? Did you all even hear her question? I'm sorry. Okay. Mr. Belfield is going to give you the mic, okay?
The question was, would we know as a whole what the committee is investing in, or we just go with what they'll do the picking on their own, like myself, my little stock I can see what I'm investing in on my own. You know, I can
Sure.
see it for myself, and then I can see whether or not I want to stay stable or go high risk. You know, could stay
Right.
with the market high if it's running. So that was.
Yeah, that was her question. And I told her the committee would decide what to invest in, what funds to invest in, or what stock to invest in. But I'm pretty sure you all will have additional conversation with that committee about that. Okay. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Belfer, you get your steps tonight.
So just one quick question. So as it relates to the committee, you know how churches have ebbs and flows in its attendance.
Yeah.
And its commitment to stay the course with the church. What happens if the committee trims down or there becomes, what happens to the funding then?
Yeah, I'm gonna let someone from your church answer that, but there are guardrails in your charge conference resolution that someone will go over. You can have anywhere between 3 to 10 members on your on the committee. So if I'm not mistaken, the church has kind of put in guardrails to ensure that you have the proper number of people on the committee at all times. But even the event, if something happens that's unforeseen and you drop below the number, just remember that you can have between 3. You got to have at least 3 and no more than 10.
Because I'm just thinking about, and I am for this, so I'm gonna tell you that now.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking about some of the churches on Steam Mill Road and other churches that have really, the membership has fallen off drastically. So what is and I'll read this, I'm a little late, but what is there an embedded plan for if something like that happens? Because then churches can also be reinvigorated later on or join other churches and things of that nature.
Yeah. Think of it like you would think of any committee in the church, because churches, their membership dues, we ebb and we flow, but we try the best. I'm not speaking for the pastor who's the chairperson of the nomination committee, Pastor Adrian. I want to make sure that that's clear. But this committee is like other committees. Pastors and the nomination team will do the very best that they can to fill those slots with people who they think are, number one, spiritually mature, and I think number 2, who can bring the advice and the expertise to this committee that will benefit the actual endowment itself. Yeah. So just like others rotate off, you can have conversations with your pastor and your nominations committee about specifics about how that would happen. But this committee is like other committees in the local church as well. Does anybody want to speak to that? I don't want to speak on behalf of St. Mary's Road. I would like for you all to kind of speak on that, because
Yeah, I can say that in your thing, if you're asking about church closures or mergers, that's on the back page of our resolution, that if for any reason there's a merger or a consolidation or dissolution of the church, it's outlined there what will happen as far as the fund returning back to the district for their resources to be used in a way that was intended by the endowment fund.
Thank you, Pastor. I thought you were talking about committees, not total church closures and mergers, so thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Will we get everything back? You say, should the church close?
Yeah,
we're not.
which this church will not be closing, but
Absolutely not.
That
You're
was in
right.
my
yeah, that's implied.
editorial that
Yeah.
I didn't mean that, but I just wanted to know the specifics. What would the money that you initially put in?
It would be all the
It would be the
funds.
whole fund.
It would be
It
the
would
whole
be the
fund.
entire endowment,
And
yes.
we've seen this in recent years, like with disaffiliation, you know, if that church closes during that process, or, you know, they turn that over to the United Methodist Church, or whatever has happened in the past, you know, when that church dissolves, all of those funds go back to the district.
Correct.
Those funds they were managing goes back to the district. Even the physical property and every chair inside that church has to be managed by a committee right at the
That
district
is
level.
correct. She's
And the
correct.
idea of the district is so that you're still serving that community where that church and those people were investing, so that the money that they put in there intending to affect that neighborhood roughly affects that similar area, unless the conference votes to do something different with the money.
That is correct. Yeah, you're fine. Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the information.
Sure.
My question is in regards to the tax implications of accessing the funds. I read ahead in the document that tells us how much we need to have in the fund before we begin to make the distributions, but of course we know that nothing is free. So I would like to know, what are the tax implications of utilizing the interest that is earned on the fund?
You don't have any tax implications because you're a 501c3. You're a nonprofit, so you don't have any tax implications. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to, well, the gentleman in the red shirt.
Thank you. My question is, the endowment will be handled by the local church, or will it be handled by your organization?
We hold the fiduciary responsibility, which means when you invest, it will be an investment with the Georgia United Methodist Foundation. And thank you for that question. What I should have said earlier, a little more about the foundation, is that we are the 5th largest foundation in the United States right now. We currently manage over $242 million in asset management with over 500 clients. Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
So going back to that question, so I know there's the tax liability because it's a 501c, but what does the Georgia United Methodist Foundation charge to manage the funds?
Right. We charge 0.5% every quarter. That is we call it management fees. Yes, ma'am. 0.5%. Okay. Good questions. Any other questions?
So what does your track record look like in terms of investments?
Well, it depends on how you choose to invest and what you invest in. For the last several years, the stock market has been pretty good, so it depends on whether you're looking at 5-year, 3-year, or 1 year. What we can guarantee in most situations is at least between 7 and an 8% return. If you compare that to your local banks with a savings and checking account, you may get 0.002 whatever. But yeah, we all know the stock market, it goes up and down. Yeah, it does. I'm sorry? Yeah, she said historically it always goes up is what she said, and I'm going to hold on to that. Anybody else? Any other questions? Let me walk back to the other side. Any other questions? Well, you guys have been great. I'm going to turn it over now to Pastor Adrian for anything else you all may have.
Well, let's certainly give Reverend Smalls a round of applause and appreciation for her time. And thank you so much for being with us. You are seeing one part of the journey that we have been on since we first learned about this opportunity to invest and increase our resources for ministry. When Reverend Doreen Smalls came to our Rock Ministry lunch last year, many members of our church had been talking about that. I had been exposed to endowments working as an associate pastor at larger churches where they had multiple endowments. And we're not talking 100 years ago. We're talking people who invested 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But when you give people a place to make those kind of investments with real estate and stock and that sort of thing, you'd be amazed at what we could do, what the potential is. One of my churches, they just had an endowment for their organ, and that's how they've been able to maintain their historic organ over the years, for example. So thank you for being a part of this process with us. Our endowment committee, if you will, began this process in June of last year, going through a process with the Georgia United Methodist Fund in going through training to learn about the endowment process and what it would take and what our responsibilities would be and how we can continue to not only set it up, but to ensure that we're setting it up for success continually each year as a church. And so at this moment, I want to share with you the members of that initial endowment committee. And what I did is, everything you want to know about the endowment committee, anything you want to know about church business is where? In the Book of Discipline, okay? So we already had some guidelines about an endowment committee, and we had guidelines from Reverend Smalls to set up an initial endowment committee. And then, if you remember at Charge Conference, this endowment committee was voted in as our committee for 2026. So that is, we take people from, this is how we chose it, with nominations, following the guidelines recommended through the Georgia United Methodist Foundation and through the Book of Discipline, is we have members from our stewardship committee, members from finance, and members from trustees, and then others we thought that could bring talents or their skills, pressing our success into service, right, that we talked about on Sunday, on the committee. So that is Enoch Asante Bediako, Willie Wells, Vera Wilson, Benny Newroth, Joshua Street, Anthony Lamar, Ora Lee Simmons, Ed Washington, Shauna Lee Gamble. And then I, as the pastor, and Cynthia Williams as a lay leader, we are ex officio non-voting members to be a part of the guidance of and direction of the committee. Ed Washington is a trustee as well, so he is our representative that the trustees have chosen to be a representative on the endowment committee, because when it comes to handling our real property, it is responsibility of the trustees to carry that out. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. I know y'all have a microphone too, right? I'm going to kick us off, and then would y'all feel comfortable with talking through some of these things as well as we go along? Okay, and so what we're going to do at this time, and I know, do you need to depart or can you stick around? So I know that Reverend Smalls, we don't want to hold her hostage all night, so she may have to tip away at some point as we get down to the nuts and bolts of our business. She's put us on the right road, and now we're going to go for it. But what I want us to do tonight is to have a chance to look at our resolution ahead of our charge conference and to ask questions or to kind of wrap our head around what it would look like for us. And so what you have is you had the initial kind of overview, 101, of what an endowment is, and Reverend Smalls kind of walked through that with us. What this is, this 4-page document, is the actual resolution that we will be voting on at Charge Conference. This is the living document that we have been working on for about 8 months now, going over that and using the expertise of the CPAs, the investment bankers, the bankers, lawyers, who have worked on this policy with us, this resolution with us, and reviewed it several times. So we'll go through this together. I'm not going to go line by line. I don't want to traumatize our endowment committee because we have done this 8,000 times, but at the same time, we know you are looking at it new. So we'll just walk through it together and you can ask questions. So it's a resolution, so it does start out with whereas, and it simply says that we desire to provide a permanent vehicle for charitable gifts to support the church's missions and ministries, and that we will intend that such gifts will be received, and it's according to the Book of Discipline and IRS, basically their code. And then we're also going to clarify in this resolution the authorities of the trustees versus our, when I say endowment committee, the full name is the Permanent Endowment and Planned Giving Ministry Committee, in terms of how to handle property and that sort of thing, and certain gifts. And we're going to talk also in this resolution about the endowment committee's authority to receive and accept those gifts, and the Board of Trustees' role as custodians to sell or do whatever that needs to be done with the property so that we can use those funds in the endowment, okay? So the name of the fund, looking at Roman numeral 1, will be known as the St. Mary's Road United Methodist Church Permanent Endowment Fund. Okay? If you want to read more about this, there's a brief paragraph on it in the Book of Discipline. Looking at number 2, the purpose of the fund is strictly for charitable purposes. So this is a living memorial, and as Reverend Smalls talked about, this is not funded through the operating budget. These gifts go to the endowment to grow separately in an investment fund. And when she talks about picking investments, not like we're like picking like Coca-Cola stock or anything like that. It's kind of like what you do with your bank. How much risk are you willing to accept in looking at a portfolio, okay? So please don't think we're like looking at ticker tape or anything like that, right? That's not what the endowment committee is doing. They are trusting the Georgia United Methodist Fund to make the investments. Our responsibility as the endowment committee really is to properly receive those gifts, work with the trustees if it's something that needs to be sold or whatever, so that we can liquidate that to place in our fund, and to work to distribute the income from that, or the interest from that fund each year directly to the ministries. Okay, that's this primary purpose. So because of that, this is the authority that you will give the endowment committee in Roman numeral 3 from the charge conference, that they are going to ensure that the terms are consistent with the purposes of the fund and the donor intent, that we will give proper acknowledgement and receipt of that, and they will also notify the Board of Trustees of any asset requiring the legal conveyance, titling, recordation, and other formalities under civil law, so that it can be held and properly recorded in the church's name. So typically, there's a paragraph in the Book of Discipline also about how the trustees are supposed to handle our property. They're the ones that if you don't give us cash, if you give us a Picasso, then I have to be like, Ed, we've got a Picasso. What are we going to do with it, right? The endowment, what we are doing in our resolution, we propose that the endowment committee will determine if the gift is proper, right? So the endowment committee might say, Ed, this might be a fake. So tell them that they need to come with an appraisal when they give us the Picasso, right? But we also, working with the trustees, they will be responsible for making sure that it's received properly, that it's sold properly, however we want to do it, to handle it for the endowment fund. But the endowment committee determines what the gifts are, but we have to work with the trustees because they're the ones that are responsible for the property. And so that's why, you should always have someone on trustees, on your endowment committee, as you go through that process together, hand in hand. And so that's why in Roman numeral 4, it talks about the powers and duties of the Board of Trustees. We went over this again and again with legal, Reed, my husband, to talk about these particular lanes, okay? And so the Board of Trustees, they'll be the legal custodians of that real property and other formally titled assets that have been gifted once they've been accepted by the committee in accordance with this resolution. And then once those net proceeds are available, then they will be invested by the committee, as we do with all gifts to the endowment fund. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so on to the Roman numeral 5. This is specifically the committee. As Reverend Small says, the composition shall be not less than 3 or more than 10 members. Okay, and then the pastor shall be an ex officio member with no voting rights. And then it may include the lay leader, representatives from finance, the Board of Trustees, and the stewardship committee. The Committee on Nominations and Leadership Development shall seek to appoint at-large members with expertise in the following areas: estate planning, public relations, marketing and sales, finance, banking, or other skills that the committee deems desirable. So this committee operates, as Reverend Small said, as any other committee that we have, where the nominations committee identifies the members of the committee, and it is presented to you with the slate of leadership as we do all of our other committees at our annual charge conference. Right now, we have those, 9 committee members that we have chosen. We've chosen a larger body. But, when we started, we wanted to have a little bit of everybody on there, and we worked together to bring that input. I know my home church has an endowment committee. I actually talk with their kind of founders, if you will, to have lessons learned from them. Their committee has 3 people, right? And some of that has been because their membership has gotten smaller, but even when they were a larger church, they always just had 3 people. That's the people who wanted to do it and do the work, and so that's what they voted on and they were comfortable with, and it's always been that way. And so the composition of that committee is determined by the nominations. Then within that committee, they will establish a chair and all of that kind of thing, like a secretary and those. And they will report to, I know we asked about the accountability, right, Snell? They will report annually to the charge conference regarding its responsibilities, okay? Now, as far as the execution authority, as far as transactions, they can execute that with the church treasurer or designee and 1 other committee member, which is very common that you need 2 people to do that kind of financial work. Now, going to Roman numeral 6. Any input from the committee? Anything that I'm doing good? All right. So, in administering the fund, this has to do with the giving part, right? So, these are just some of the things that outline the powers of the committee, right? That it has to be done, of course, and it has to be legal, right? It has to go along with the IRS code. But it also has things in the resolution that should be responsibilities of the committee. And for example, look at C, to stress opportunities for giving through wills, annuities, trusts, life insurance, memorials, and other types of property. So it is also will be the endowment committee's responsibility to continue year after year to educate the church on how they can give. So now we can be thinking about, do I want to give that annuity to the church in my estate planning? Or do I want to give a percentage of that after I give something to my kiddos, right? We can begin to think about those things and educate, because sometimes what happens is the church starts off gangbusters, and then after a few years, people forget we even have an endowment. We don't want people to do that. We want people to continue to know that this is an option for them and to be thinking of this as a separate opportunity from your regular tithes and offerings. That's why I say this isn't about like a fundraising, trying to, pick up that cash week to week, but thinking more about your investments and property and things that can really make an impact that you may have not thought about before. So this is a separate kind of revenue stream for our ministries, right? A different flavor. All right, so, but also look at some of the other things here in terms of their power to reinvest, that they may have to employ, for example, in K, accountants or legal counsel at fair compensation if they need some sort of guidance on something, right? And there's also some protections in there as far as not doing anything that is self-dealing, or you have your own, a conflict of interest, that sort of thing, as members of the committee. And they determine all of those things looking in M as far as what they're going to do with funds and those sort of things by a majority vote of the committee. Okay, and so if you see O and P, on the next page, it talks about acting by the vote and majority of the voting members. Unless they actually want to amend this resolution. Maybe down the road something happens that we don't foresee. We can, by 2/3 vote, choose to say we want to change this resolution, but then we also have to bring that to charge conference to vote again by 2/3, right, to get to change this resolution, okay? All right. Now, let's talk about the management, because I know we had a lot of questions about that, okay? And so we're on to Roman numeral 7. Any questions so far? I know I'm not reading every word, but I know that you will also have time, okay, to take this home and look at it before we come back on March 5th. Okay, so Roman numeral 7 is investment of the permanent endowment funds. And so the objectives, right, is to conserve the principal. And so this fund is growing, and we are only going to take a certain percentage of the proceeds of it annually to spend, right, of what is earned in interest. We're not messing with the principal, okay? And then as Reverend Small said, It will to provide regular income at a reasonable rate and investment in institutions, companies, corporations, and funds that make a positive contribution towards the goals outlined in the social principles of United Methodist Church. Do you know where you can read about the social principles of United Methodist Church? In the Book of Discipline, my favorite book, right? So if you want to read more about that, these are a thing, okay? There's a whole list of social principles, and that's what governs the investments. Then custody and management, we talked a little bit about that the Georgia United Methodist Foundation is the appointed institutional custodian of the fund. That is very common for Methodist churches, that they will use their conferences, United Methodist Fund, to do the investments. Just like we entrust WestPath, right? Who manages how much money with our pensions and benefits? About $500 million, right? So we're not just choosing somebody's cousin on the street that we heard could turn a buck to invest, right? We are using our established and trusted foundations to do that. Then we're going to get into, now is that the paragraph where they talk about, let's see, anything else I need to highlight from that one? I don't think so. Y'all can just continue to read that one. I'll go on to 8, which is the gifts to the permanent fund, okay? So as we kind of mentioned in the beginning of the resolution, that all of the grants, gifts, donations, legacies, bequests, etc., will be accepted by the endowment committee and under this authority. For undesignated gifts. Now, when we say that, that means you just want to give a gift to the endowment fund for it to be used for whatever the endowment committee determines. Okay, if you give a gift like that, right, of any size, if it's an undesignated gift, this is what the committee has chosen to give it to. If you look down at number 1 and number 2, from those undesignated gifts, whatever the proceeds are from that year, when they cut that check from the Georgia United Methodist Fund, we are going to put 60% towards whatever's needed with nurture, outreach, and witness ministries, and 40% to our capital improvements. Read, HVAC, roof, repairs, that sort of thing, the building, okay? We wanted to have more of an emphasis on the ministries, but we also wanted to have some responsibility to our facilities as well. And as some of our star students, like Ms. Hart, have read ahead already, they have seen that no distribution shall occur until the fund balance reaches $100,000. Now, I'm going to talk about designated gifts, and then I'm going to invite you all to come up to talk about the 4%, the income from the fund, and why we chose the $100,000 mark, okay? All right, so put a pin there. I want you to go down to C, for designated gifts. This is not only do I want to give it to the endowment fund, but I want to give it for a specific cause, right? I want to give it to replace the carpet. I want to always make sure the church has plush carpet, okay? If you want to give a specific gift, no, but seriously, if you say, I want it to go to the music ministry, or I have in my mind, I want it to go specifically to ministries K through 5, you can give a specific designated gift and name it for something specific, but if you do that, it's for a pledge of $20,000 or more, okay? And you can talk about why we chose that as well. But the idea here is if you have a passion for something, we certainly welcome that gift, but we don't want to splinter our endowment fund too much with so many individual name gifts, because then it's just going to take that much longer to see the proceeds from that interest building on that gift. If everyone gives $500 there or $1,000 there, we really want to encourage our members to give to the undesignated fund so that it can grow, right, as a larger fund, and we'll have more freedom to spend it as we need it on our ministries from year to year. As I was looking back on a sermon I preached last year about the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, having enough enough oil in your lantern, right, until Jesus returns. You have some immediate needs, like we need gas in the bus, right? We can't wait 5 years from now for that. We need that this week. Then you have your kind of, mid-range needs. Like we know in the next year, we have got to replace our HVAC system, okay? Feels a little bit like that right now, but anyway, I digress. Then we're looking at long-term goals, right? For things that we can't even see, what we call in the military, beyond visual range. The capability to hit targets that we can't even see with our own physical eyes. So we want to have some flexibility in the fund if we encourage the undesignated giving so that the people who are administering the fund in the future can hit the targets that we couldn't see, but they clearly have a need for. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions for Enoch and Willie, and I'm going to invite them up here to talk more about the nuts and bolts of the fund so you can hear about the return and why we chose this minimum and that sort of thing, what we hope to see.
I think we need our wizard here. Where's
It's a part of our stewardship committee, so we asked him to come along as well.
Test 1, 2. First, I'm going to sort of break it down in the numbers. When she was talking about the $100,000, that's the minimum we said that we would have in the account before we touch anything. And so if you have the $100,000, and at the end of the year, let's say we netted a 10% interest. So now we got 10% of $100,000, which is $10,000 that we can use. 40% of that, which is $4,000, I think would go to the.
It goes to our capital. We get 4% total. Yeah, it's a 4%.
We had 4% and 60%. 4% we go to capital improvement. So in other words, we would have $4,000 set aside for capital improvement. Then you would have another $6,000 set around for the ministries or whatever we decide. Or we could turn around, I think we put it in, we could roll that over to the next year. In other words, we would take that $100,000, don't pull anything out, then we have $110,000 now going into the next year, which at that same rate, but now we'll have $110,000, which you got $11,000 to work with. The idea is to make sure we keep growing the money so that we can do things in the future. One of the things I learned that folks told me years ago is that poor folks save, rich folks invest. That's not necessarily true. Wise people invest. You take a little bit of saving, and what you got left, you try to invest with it, but do it wisely. And that's how you really get ahead. And so that's what we're doing here for the church, because for years and years and years, we keep, I don't know how to say it delicately, it's a thin line between being broke. Every year we ask for more, asking for more. We want to get to a point where we have money set aside that can keep this church running and prospering in the future. And I will not have to come around every year asking you to increase your contribution. That's the purpose of it. Right now, the reason we increase contribution is because we don't have nothing in reserve. We're just living on the sheepshead. And I think we can get to that point if we do it wisely. And that was the whole idea of this. Anthony sat with me in the meeting that we were having when we were putting this together. And he started rolling out some numbers to me about if you do this, in the X amount of years, you'll have this. And I asked Anthony, why you tell me that about 40 years ago? You better go over there with.
I can speak to that a little bit. So I'll tell you how I know it. So you guys heard I am an engineer. I have practiced engineering ever since I left college back in 1996. I practiced engineering as an engineering officer for 11 years in the Air Force, and I've been in engineering ever since I've been out of the Air Force. Engineering manager, I'm currently a general manager of a plant. So some of the education you get there is that we do capital projects. We do return on investments. We do calculation of those. It's the same formula that is used to do the calculation when we do investments here. It's the same formula that you would do if you would do personal investments. So what I wanted to say, one of the examples I want to give is when the church was built. I know we just went through the scenario of paying the church off, and we're talking about investing for HVAC system. Really, if the endowment fund was in existence way back when you created the church back then, you really wouldn't be asking for the money from how we're asking it to pay the air conditioning off. It would be there. The other thing is how we went through to raise up special monies to pay off the church. We would have easily probably paid the church off a couple of years ago. When I say that, it's because there's a difference between simple interest and compound interest. Compound, you would have compounded that interest over time, and you heard the rates that Dr. Small, Reverend Small passed out, 7 to 8%. And some of you, if you look at your 401ks, I know mine is tracking like 20% around that mark. So it's way above the 7 or 8%. So if you ever think of compounding at that percentage over that period of time, you'd have been well over $1 million just off $100,000 investment way back in year 2000, somewhere around the area when we established the church here. So I want to put that in your thoughts because I know Ed said, hey, you mentioned for the future. When we was in the choir practice the other day, one of the things I thought about is the age difference, because my mother-in-law, she strongly pushes this endowment fund. If I look at the age of where I am now, we're almost 30 years apart. So if I can see myself sitting right there on that seat 30 years later, we should have in this endowment fund more than $1 million. I'm just telling you. And if people faithfully give, you're going to be far over $1 million. So the reason we established that $100,000, actually I really wanted it at $200,000, where we were going back and forth. And the reason why, because your principles, the stronger your principle, the greater your return. You put it at $100,000, people are ready to use the $100,000 on something. But if you build that principle and then start pulling it from it, then your growth will still be higher than what you're pulling from. So that was my thoughts and idea behind that. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Willie.
I let the smart guys talk, so.
Question. I know there was one question, and Reverend Small addressed it. Folks start talking about, well, what happened if the church go under? Or what happened if things that don't, it doesn't materialize, not work the way we planned it? What do you do with the money? Remember, there's two things that govern this organization. One is the Book of Discipline, and the other is the IRS code. A church is a 501c3, just like any nonprofit, and you have to have a clause in it to say what happened to fund if something happened to that organization no longer exists. And all churches and any nonprofit have to have it. Our Book of Discipline addressed it. We addressed it somewhere here in this policy. It ain't just that we'll decide, well, heck, we'll just take this money and put it in Anthony's account so he can get to that million You know, that's not how it works, you know. We don't make that type of decision. And the thing about the board is, it's not a one person that makes decisions. All decisions are made by the board. And board members probably during the future will change from one. We're not here for the next 100 years. Like I'm on my 3rd year of being the finance guy. I thought it was 3-year assignment, but anyway, I'm still here. Question, someone had a question over there.
Thank you. So I know that we've spoken before about the many assets the church already has through givings and through bequeaths, right? So what is the plan to use current assets to, I guess, jumpstart the fund? And how long do you estimate it will take for us to be fully endowed?
In other words, you want to know when we're going to come up with that first 100,000?
So, for instance, I know that we've been given, the church has been given stocks. You've talked about that before. So my question is, what is the plan to use our current assets to begin to fund the endowment?
Oh, the 5,000?
No, she's talking
No.
about people who were already committing stocks and their investments, remember, to our church.
Right.
What about using that for the endowment fund? Which that would require.
Well, that account,
Yeah, I think
we don't quite have enough to get our initial 5,000.
I'm not asking whether we have assets to fully fund the endowment. My question is, do we plan to use, and I understand if we don't, but do we plan to use any of our current assets to begin to fund the endowment? And if there's the plan to do that, what do you estimate would be the timeline to fully fund the first $100,000?
The initial 5,000 part of it will come from what you're saying, the investment that we have already into, I think it's a Nova Security apartment, but it's not quite where we need it to be. And then I'm looking at another nonprofit that we have within the church that's going to help give us some seed money. But that has to be presented to their board.
Because, just to as a reminder, any monies that's going into the endowment fund, that has to be designated, indicated by that donor, right? I mean, we could, all you have to do is just ask the person, hey, we want to use it for this or that, right? Yeah.
I understand $5,000 is required to start the fund. I'm jumping ahead to when we have $100,000 and can begin to use the fund. That's my question.
That's annually.
Well, let me.
Is there a timeline? Is there a projected timeline for us to reach that point?
So, good idea. We are just beginning to think through all the strategy that goes with it. But like she said, we need to be mindful of reserve account for short-term needs versus actually investing what we already have for long-term. Because once we invest that, we cannot touch that principle. So yes, we have an account. We have a brokerage account. We have about 25,000 in it. But that is part of our reserve account for operations. So if we decide to move that to start the endowment, we sell ourselves short if we need emergency funds to do anything. So we are going to think through all the strategies, but I think ultimately we are going to depend on ourselves to come up with the seed money. That shouldn't interfere with the reserve account we need to run the facility.
Also, Yvonne, we've talked about ways for us to raise that money. I would like to see us get the 100K this year, honestly. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Well,
But
I'm sorry. I think that's the purpose of this meeting, to educate folks,
yes,
being transparent on what we need.
yes.
And then hopefully when they look at their assets, they can determine how to help us get to where we need to go.
Yes, it's because the endowment committee does not have the power to move around the money in our general operating budget to use for the endowment committee. That's not the way our resolution is set up. Our resolution is set up that the endowment committee is only going to invest those gifts that people say, this check is for the endowment, or this property or this investment is for the endowment. But looking at getting to that 100K goal, we are looking at having further, I've charged stewardship with, having further sessions on legacy, wills, estates, helping people, estate planning, helping people during the year, right, to understand how they can set that up to benefit the church. Because like she said, so many times people will just give that money, they're thinking of these things and they only think about maybe the grandkids, or they think about the hospice that they're in at the time, or what's right before them, and they don't think about the church also has an avenue of perpetual giving. And also, we're looking at things like All Saints Day, doing memorials that you can make a contribution in honor of someone to the endowment fund. So we have some ideas like that. The church anniversary could be another option. We haven't talked about that, but we've definitely talked about the All Saints Day, and then about doing those estate planning sessions to help people talk about those other assets that they can use to identify the church as a recipient of that.
Any other questions?
All this, what we're talking about is good, but we need to be mindful that we need to get this information to more people, members of the church, because there's just a few of us here now just getting information, but we need to have some kind of plan of action to be formative, to get more people involved and informed in what we're trying to do. The initiation about the 5,000 getting started. I think if you come on with another way
No.
to get the members more involved and being informed, bureaucracy on this.
No, I totally agree. We're going to have constant communication. There was a lot of information put out here today, but you see the number of people we have here in the congregation. And if you are the one that I'm just depending on, just the folks here, we may get there about the next 20 years. So, but hopefully like Pastor said, we're going to do it by the end of the year. Knock on wood, pray. But it's doable. That's the main thing. It's doable. And I feel comfortable with it, because there are folks, I believe there are folks in this congregation, they have some loving hearts, and they're willing to support our efforts. And I'm not counting on just one person. A lot of us can come together to make this work. And we just see what happens. But we're not going to quit. I mean, however long it takes, I think it's something we got to do. And we realize, we talk about the HVACs now. The main goal was to pay the church off. I got an engineer standing here beside me, and he knows that this church has age on it. And we're going to constantly have these different types of repairs. But we want to get to a point where those type of repairs and things that we want to do in the future is not stressful to us. We just write a check. Okay? Anything else for you all? Pastor?
Thank you, gentlemen. Do you see the vision? Okay, go forth and share the good news. Beautiful are the feet of those who share the good news, right? So now that you've taken the time to understand, you can help others understand this, right? And help us understand how we can help you share that, whether it's taking time in your Bible studies and your small groups, United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women. Let's think about how we can continue to share this and help people understand this, and ahead of our Charge Conference, but even after Charge Conference, as we continue to do that work. Reverend Cook will be here on March 5th at 6 p.m. for us to have a special charge conference, and it will be just for this, to review our endowment fund resolution and to vote on that and approve it, okay? So if you have any other questions before then, feel free to reach out to me or to other members of the endowment committee for clarification, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. I want to thank you for your time and for your passion, for being committed to learning more about how we can give to our community in perpetuity through an endowment fund. If we are at a place where we can pray, I would invite us to do so. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for this great responsibility and opportunity that you have given us, Lord, to serve through St. Mary's Road United Methodist Church. We have such a rich and proud history of where we began on St. Mary's Hill to where we are today in a fully paid building, God. We thank you for all the ministries that have transformed lives over the generations from 1956 until today, God. And we give you thanks for what you're going to do in the next 70 years, God. We know that you have a purpose for our church, and we know that you have a vision even beyond what you have given us, God, and we are faithful to your call. We ask that you bless us, Lord, that we might be a continued blessing to our community. Open hearts and minds that we might pull together, that we might fully fill our lanterns until Jesus returns. It is in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Amen. Have a good evening.